The hall went quiet the moment Damon Blake raised his hand and pointed at Lyra Hart in front of everyone. Hundreds of guests stood packed inside the grand hall of Alderpack, holding cups of wine, waiting for the engagement ceremony to begin. Lyra stood in a pale blue dress at the center of the raised platform, her hands folded, her heart beating fast with nervous hope. She had waited 2 years for this night. She had trained. She had smiled through insults. She had tried so hard to be enough for the pack that never wanted her. Now Damon looked at her the way someone looks at a stain on a clean floor. "I cannot marry her," he said, loud enough for the entire hall to hear. "Look at her. She cannot even shift properly. Her wolf is weak. She is an embarrassment to this pack, and to my family name." A ripple of laughter spread through the crowd like fire catching dry grass. Someone near the back whistled. A woman covered her mouth, pretending to hide her smile, though her eyes shone with cruel amusement. Lyra felt her face burn. She wanted to run, but her legs would not move. She had grown up being told she was less than everyone else, a girl born with a fractured wolf spirit, unable to fully shift like normal pack members. She had learned to live with quiet insults. But this was different. This was public. This was meant to break her completely, and every person in that hall seemed happy to watch it happen. "Please," she whispered, though she barely recognized her own voice. "Damon, we can talk about this somewhere else." "There is nothing to talk about," he snapped. "I only agreed to this engagement because my father asked me to be kind to you, but I am done pretending. You are not worthy of standing beside an alpha's son." The hall erupted again, some guests clapping as if he had said something clever instead of something cruel. Lyra's mother, seated near the front, lowered her head, unable to meet her daughter's eyes. Even the pack elders, the people who were supposed to protect the weak, said nothing. No one moved to stop the humiliation. No one seemed to care that a young woman was being torn apart in front of an entire kingdom of wolves. Lyra felt something cold settle inside her chest, a kind of numbness that came from being hurt too many times in too short a space. She looked down at the marble floor, refusing to let tears fall in front of people who wanted to see her break. Then, without warning, the doors at the far end of the hall opened with a heavy sound that echoed through the entire room. Every head turned. A line of armed men in dark uniforms entered first, followed by a tall figure whose presence alone seemed to drain the noise out of the air. He wore a black coat lined with silver thread, plain but unmistakably powerful. His dark hair was cut short, his jaw sharp, his eyes the color of storm clouds before lightning strikes. He walked like someone who had never once in his life needed permission to enter a room. Lyra had never seen him in person before, but she knew immediately who he was. Everyone did. Cale Ashford, the Alpha King. He ruled over every pack in the region, the strongest wolf born in 3 generations, a leader so feared and respected that most alphas bowed their heads simply at the mention of his name. He rarely left his own territory, and he certainly never attended small pack ceremonies like this one. His sudden appearance made no sense, and the confusion on every face in the hall proved it. Damon's father, the Alpha of Alderpack, rushed forward, bowing low. "Your Majesty, we did not know you would honor us with your presence tonight. If we had known, we would have—" "I did not come for your ceremony," Cale said, his voice calm, but carrying easily across the silent hall. "I came because I felt something pull at me 3 days ago, the moment my wolf recognized a bond forming somewhere in this territory. I have been tracking that feeling ever since." The Alpha of Alderpack straightened, confused. "A bond, Your Majesty?" Cale did not answer him. His gray eyes moved slowly across the crowd, searching, until they landed on the platform where Lyra stood frozen, her cheeks still wet from the humiliation she had barely managed to hide. The moment his eyes met hers, something shifted in the air. Lyra felt a strange warmth spread through her chest, a pull she had never experienced before, as if an invisible thread had suddenly appeared between them and tightened without warning. She gasped softly, pressing a hand to her chest. Cale's expression changed instantly. The calm control in his face cracked, replaced for a moment by something raw and unmistakable. Shock, then recognition, then a fierce and quiet certainty. "It's her," he said, almost to himself. The crowd began to murmur, confusion spreading like ripples on water. Damon, still standing near Lyra, looked between the king and the woman he had just rejected in front of everyone, his face draining of color. Cale began walking forward. He did not rush. Every step he took across that long hall felt deliberate, powerful, impossible to ignore. Guests stepped aside without being asked, clearing a path as if some invisible force pushed them back. Lyra stood completely still, unable to understand what was happening. unable to trust the sudden hope rising inside her chest after the crushing humiliation she had just survived. When Kale reached the platform, he did not look at Damon. He did not look at the alpha of Alderpack, who stood frozen with his mouth slightly open. He looked only at Lyra, his gray eyes studying her face as if he were trying to memorize every detail after searching for it his entire life. "You felt it too," he said quietly, only loud enough for her to hear, "the pull. Just now." Lyra's throat tightened. She managed a small nod, too stunned to speak. Kale turned to face the crowd. His voice, when he spoke again, filled the entire hall without him needing to shout. 3 days ago, my wolf sensed a bond forming, a connection stronger than anything I have felt in my life. Tonight, standing in this hall, I have confirmed it with my own eyes." He paused, letting his words settle over the silent crowd. "This woman is my fated mate." The hall exploded into whispers, gasps, and disbelief. Somewhere near the back, a glass slipped from someone's hand and shattered on the floor, the sound sharp in the sudden chaos of voices. Damon stumbled backward as if he had been struck. "That's impossible," he said, his voice cracking with disbelief. "She's nothing. She's weak. She can't even—" Kale turned his head slowly toward him, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Careful," Kale said, his voice low and dangerous. "You are speaking about the woman who will stand beside me as queen." The word queen landed like a thunderclap. Gasps rippled through every corner of the hall. Lyra's own mind refused to process what she had just heard, her thoughts spinning too fast to hold on to anything solid. Damon's father dropped to his knees immediately, bowing so low his forehead nearly touched the floor. "Your Majesty, please forgive my son's disrespect. He did not know. He could not have known. He knew enough to humiliate her in front of hundreds of people," Kale said coldly. "That tells me everything I need to know about his character." Lyra finally found her voice, though it trembled. "Your Majesty, I don't understand. This must be some kind of mistake." "I am not. You are exactly who my wolf recognized the moment I walked into this hall," Kale interrupted gently, his tone softening only for her. "There is no mistake in a mate bond. It does not choose based on rank, or strength, or the opinions of small men who cannot see value standing right in front of them." His gaze flicked briefly toward Damon before returning to her, steady and unwavering. Lyra's mind raced through everything that had just happened. The crushing weight of public rejection followed almost instantly by an announcement so enormous it barely felt real. She searched Kale's face for any sign of pity, any hint that this was some elaborate act meant to embarrass Damon's family in return for a political insult. But all she found in his gray eyes was quiet certainty, an intensity that made her chest tighten with something she could not yet name. "Why," she whispered, almost afraid of the answer, "why would the strongest alpha in the region want someone like me?" Kale's expression shifted, something almost pained crossing his features for a brief second. "Because for years, I was told my mate bond might never form, that some alphas of my strength never find their match. I stopped hoping for it, and then 3 days ago, I felt something wake up inside me that I thought would sleep forever." He held her gaze. "I am not here out of pity. I am here because you are the other half of something I did not know I was missing." The hall remained frozen in stunned silence, hundreds of eyes locked on the unfolding scene, no one daring to speak or move. Lyra glanced toward her mother, who sat with tears streaming silently down her face, though whether from shock or relief, Lyra could not tell. She looked toward the guests who had laughed at her only minutes earlier, their faces now pale with disbelief, some of them refusing to meet her eyes out of shame. Kale extended his hand toward her, palm open, patient, giving her the choice rather than forcing it. "I know this is sudden," he said quietly. "I know you have no reason yet to trust anything I say, but I am asking you to leave this place with me tonight, not as a prisoner, not as a political prize, but as the woman my wolf has chosen above every other in this world." Lyra looked down at his outstretched hand. Every instinct told her this could not be real, that something this large could not simply fall into her lap minutes after the worst humiliation of her life. Yet the warmth in her chest, that strange invisible pull, had not faded since the moment their eyes first met. Slowly, she lifted her hand and placed it in his. The instant their palms touched, a visible shimmer of golden light traced along their joined hands, faint but unmistakable, a sign recognized by every wolf in the hall as proof of a true and unbreakable bond. Gasps rose again through the crowd, louder this time, mixed now with awe instead of ridicule. Kale closed his fingers gently around hers and turned to face the stunned hall one final time. "Let it be known," he said, his voice carrying the full weight of his authority, "that from this night forward, Anyone who insults this woman insults their king. He guided her down from the platform, past Damon, who stood frozen and pale, past the alpha of Alderpack, still bowed low to the floor, and past hundreds of guests who only minutes ago had laughed at her pain and now watched in silent disbelief as she walked out beside the most powerful man in their world. As they reached the great doors of the hall, Lyra glanced back one final time at the life she was leaving behind, the pack that had never valued her, the people who had cheered her downfall. She did not know yet what waited for her beyond those doors, in a kingdom she had never seen, beside a king she had only just met. But for the first time in years, she did not feel small. She felt seen. The carriage ride away from Alderpack passed in near silence. Lyra sat across from Kale, her hands clenched tightly in her lap, still trying to process the last hour of her life. The humiliation, the sudden reversal, the golden shimmer that had passed between their palms, all of it felt like a fever dream she might wake up from at any moment. Yet the king, sitting across from her, was very real, his gray eyes watching her with quiet patience as the carriage rolled through the dark forest road that connected Alder territory to the outer lands. "You haven't said a word since we left," Kale said finally, his voice low, careful not to startle her. "I don't know what to say," Lyra admitted. "An hour ago I was being rejected in front of my entire pack. Now I am sitting in a carriage with the Alpha King, being told I am his fated mate. Forgive me if my mind is still trying to catch up." A faint, almost amused smile touched his lips, though his eyes remained gentle. "That is fair. I imagine tonight has been the strangest night of your life. The strangest and the most humiliating," she said quietly, looking out the window at the passing trees. "Everyone saw it, everyone laughed, and now everyone will say I only matter because you decided I do." Kale leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. "Let me be clear about something. I did not choose you tonight because I felt sorry for you. A mate bond is not something an alpha of my strength can fake or force. My wolf recognized yours the moment I entered that hall, before I even saw your face. Whatever happened to you before tonight, whatever cruelty you endured, none of it changes what my wolf already knew to be true." Lyra studied him carefully, searching for any crack in his sincerity. She had spent her whole life being underestimated, dismissed, treated as though her weaker shift made her less valuable as a person. It was hard to believe that the most powerful man in the region could look at her and see anything worth choosing. "Why did it take 3 days for you to find me?" she asked. "If the bond formed the moment it did, why not immediately?" "Bonds do not always announce themselves clearly," Kale explained. "Mine came as a pull, a restlessness in my chest that grew stronger each day. My advisors thought it was stress from ruling. It took me time to recognize what it truly was, and even longer to trace its direction to Alder territory." He paused. "When I finally understood, I traveled here as quickly as I could. I did not expect to arrive in the middle of your engagement ceremony. I did not expect to find you being humiliated in front of hundreds of people." Lyra's chest tightened at the memory, the laughter, the cold judgment in Damon's eyes, the frozen silence of a pack that valued cruelty over kindness. She had spent years trying to earn a place among people who never intended to give her one. "You do not need to explain everything tonight," she said softly. "This is a lot to accept all at once." "I understand," Kale said. "I am not asking you to trust me completely by morning. I am only asking you to give this bond a chance to prove itself, rather than dismissing it because of how quickly it revealed itself." The carriage rolled on in silence for a while, the rhythmic sound of the wheels against the dirt road filling the space between them. Lyra watched the trees blur past the window, her mind drifting back to her mother's tear-streaked face, to the pack members who had laughed without shame, to the life she had spent 23 years building despite constant rejection. "What happens now?" she asked eventually. "Where are we going?" "To my territory," Kale said. "Blackridge, the seat of my kingdom. It is several hours from here. You will have your own quarters, separate from mine, until you are ready for anything more. No one will force you into a role you are not prepared for." "And your pack, your advisors, will they accept someone like me as their future queen?" Kale's jaw tightened slightly, the first sign of tension she had seen in him since he had claimed her hand back in the hall. "Not everyone will be pleased," he admitted honestly. "There are nobles in my court who have long hoped I would choose a mate from among their own families, for political advantage or personal ambition. My decision tonight will disappoint some of them." Lyra felt a familiar knot form in her stomach, the same dread she had carried for years around Damon's family and their endless judgment. "So I am walking from one place where I am unwanted into another." "No," Kale said firmly, meeting her eyes. "You are walking into a place where you are protected. Whatever resentment exists among certain nobles, it will not be allowed to touch you. My word as king ensures that. I will not stand by and watch you humiliated again, not while I have breath in my body. Something in his tone, steady and unwavering, eased a small part of the tension coiled inside her chest. She did not fully trust it yet, could not fully trust anything after tonight's whirlwind of events, but there was a certain comfort in the conviction behind his words. Hours passed as the carriage continued its journey, the dark forest eventually giving way to open hills bathed in pale moonlight. Lyra dozed briefly, exhaustion finally catching up with her after the emotional weight of the evening, and when she woke, the carriage was slowing, the outline of a massive stone fortress rising against the night sky in the distance. Blackridge. The castle sat atop a hill, its towers lit with warm torchlight, surrounded by high walls and dense forest on all sides. Even from a distance, Lyra could sense the power radiating from the place. A stronghold built to withstand any threat, ruled by a king feared across every territory in the region. "We're here," Kale said quietly, watching her reaction as the carriage approached the massive iron gates. Lyra's stomach twisted with nerves as the gates creaked open, revealing a long stone path leading up to the castle entrance, where a row of guards and staff members already stood waiting, alerted by riders sent ahead of the carriage. Word of the king's sudden mate claim had apparently traveled faster than the vehicle itself. As the carriage came to a stop, Lyra caught sight of a young woman standing near the entrance, arms crossed, her expression unreadable in the flickering torchlight. She was strikingly beautiful, dressed in fine dark clothing that marked her as someone of high status within the court. Something about the way she watched the carriage, her eyes narrowing slightly the moment Lyra stepped out, sent a small chill down Lyra's spine. "Who is that?" Lyra asked quietly as Kale helped her down from the carriage. Kale's gaze flicked briefly toward the woman before returning to Lyra. "Celine Vale, daughter of one of my most influential council members. She has long been favored by many in my court as a suitable match for me." His tone remained neutral, but Lyra caught the faint tightness in his jaw. Celine approached slowly, her expression shifting into a polite smile that did not quite reach her eyes. "Your Majesty," she said, bowing slightly before turning her attention to Lyra. "And this must be the mate everyone is already whispering about." "Lyra Hart," Kale said simply, his hand resting protectively at the small of Lyra's back. "My fated mate and future queen." Celine's smile remained fixed, though something colder flickered briefly behind her eyes. "Welcome to Blackridge," she said smoothly. "I am sure you will find our court quite different from wherever you came from." There was nothing overtly hostile in her words, yet Lyra felt the subtle challenge buried beneath them, a warning wrapped in polite courtesy. She had spent enough years navigating cruelty disguised as kindness to recognize the pattern immediately. "Thank you," Lyra replied evenly, refusing to let her exhaustion or nerves show. "I am looking forward to learning about my new home." Kale guided her past Celine and up the stone steps toward the castle entrance, his hand steady against her back, a silent reassurance that she was not walking into this new world alone. As they passed through the massive doors into a grand entrance hall lit with hundreds of candles, Lyra caught sight of more court members gathered along the edges of the room, watching with curious, calculating eyes. She squared her shoulders, lifting her chin despite the exhaustion pulling at every part of her body. Tonight she had been humiliated in front of an entire pack, then claimed as a queen by the most powerful alpha in the region. Whatever challenges waited for her within these castle walls, she refused to let anyone see her break again. She had survived worse than cold stares and polite threats disguised as welcome. She would survive this too. Lyra woke the next morning in a room grander than anything she had ever known. Sunlight streamed through tall windows draped in soft gold curtains, illuminating a bedroom larger than her entire childhood home. The bed beneath her was piled with silk pillows, the furniture carved from dark polished wood, and a fireplace crackled softly in the corner despite the mild morning air. For a moment, lying still beneath the heavy blankets, she almost believed the previous night had been nothing more than an elaborate dream. Then she remembered the golden shimmer between her hand and Kale's, and she knew it had all been real. A soft knock sounded at the door before it opened, revealing a young woman with kind eyes and dark curly hair, carrying a tray of tea and warm bread. "Good morning, my lady," she said, setting the tray down gently on a table near the window. "My name is Nora. I have been assigned to help you settle in." Lyra sat up slowly, still disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. "Thank you, Nora. I appreciate it." Nora smiled warmly, a genuine kindness in her expression that felt different from the cold politeness Lyra had encountered from Celine the night before. "The whole castle is talking about you," she admitted, pouring the tea. "Not always kindly, I am sorry to say. But there are many of us who are glad the king finally found his mate. He has seemed lonely for a long time, even surrounded by so many people. The comment surprised Lyra. She had assumed a king as powerful as Kale would want for nothing, least of all companionship. Lonely, he rules an entire kingdom. Ruling and living are not the same thing, Nora said simply. Power does not keep a person warm at night. Lyra considered this as she sipped the tea, its warmth spreading through her chest and easing some of the tension from the previous night's exhaustion. Perhaps there was more to Kale than the imposing figure who had swept into that hall and upended her entire life within minutes. After breakfast, Nora helped her dress in simple but elegant clothing, far finer than anything Lyra had owned before, and guided her through the winding stone corridors of the castle toward the courtyard, where Kale had requested her presence. She found him standing near a training yard, watching a group of young warriors practice hand-to-hand combat under the supervision of an older instructor. He turned the moment she approached, his gray eyes softening slightly at the sight of her. "I trust you slept well," he said. "Better than I expected," Lyra admitted, "though I still feel like I might wake up back in Alder territory at any moment." Kale's expression grew more serious. "I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly, without worrying about how I might react." Lyra tensed slightly, unsure what to expect. "All right? Do you regret leaving with me last night?" he asked. "I know everything happened quickly. I know you had no time to think clearly before making a decision that changed the course of your entire life. If you wish to return to Alder territory, to your family, I will arrange it personally." The offer surprised her, the sincerity behind it even more so. Most people in her life had only ever taken from her, rarely offering a genuine choice in return. "I don't regret it," she said slowly, testing the truth of her own words as she spoke them. "Alder territory never felt like home. Not really. Not since I was a child." "And here?" Kale asked. "Does this feel any closer to home?" Lyra glanced around the courtyard, at the stone walls stretching high above them, at the warriors training in the distance, at the castle looming behind them like a fortress built to protect something precious. "It's too soon to say," she admitted honestly. "But it feels less lonely than what I left behind." Something in Kale's expression eased at her words, a quiet relief passing briefly across his features, before he schooled it back into calm composure. "Then let us take things one day at a time," he said. "There is no need to rush understanding between us." They walked together through the courtyard, Kale pointing out different sections of the castle grounds, the training yards, the healing quarters, the great hall where formal gatherings were held. As they walked, Lyra noticed the way certain court members watched them from a distance, some with curiosity, others with barely concealed resentment. "They don't trust me," she said quietly, noticing a cluster of nobles whispering behind raised hands as they passed. "They don't know you," Kale corrected gently. "There is a difference. Trust takes time to build, but the ones who whisper without reason are simply uncomfortable with change." "Celine seemed more than uncomfortable last night," Lyra said carefully, watching Kale's reaction. His jaw tightened briefly. "Celine's father has pushed for a match between us for years, believing it would strengthen his political standing within my court. Celine herself has never hidden her ambition to become queen. My mate bond forming with you disrupts plans that many in this castle have quietly worked toward for a long time." "That sounds like a dangerous kind of disappointment," Lyra said. "It is," Kale admitted, "which is why I want you to remain cautious, especially in the early days. Not everyone within these walls wishes you well, no matter how gracious they appear on the surface." Lyra absorbed his warning carefully, filing it away alongside every other lesson she had learned about surviving in spaces where she was not fully welcome. She had spent years navigating similar dynamics within Alderpack, learning to read the difference between genuine kindness and polished cruelty. As the day progressed, Kale introduced her to several members of his inner circle, advisors and warriors who had served him for years. Most greeted her with cautious respect, though a few offered warmth that felt entirely genuine, particularly an older warrior named Elias, who had served as Kale's personal guard since childhood. "Any woman who can survive public humiliation and still walk with her head held high earns my respect," Elias said bluntly, offering Lyra a firm handshake. The king chose well. Lyra felt a small, grateful smile tug at her lips, the first moment of genuine acceptance she had felt since arriving at Blackridge. "Thank you," she said. "That means more than you know." Later that evening, as the sun began to set over the castle grounds, Kale found Lyra sitting alone on a stone bench overlooking the training yard, watching the sky shift through shades of orange and purple. "May I join you?" he asked. She nodded, shifting slightly to make room. He sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. though he kept a respectful distance between them. "I know this is overwhelming," he said quietly. "New home, new people, new expectations, all within the span of a single day. I do not expect you to adjust overnight." "It helps that you keep saying that," Lyra admitted. "Most people in my life expected instant perfection, instant gratitude, instant obedience. You keep giving me room to breathe." "You deserve more than room to breathe," Cale said, his voice low and sincere. "You deserve a life where you are valued, not tolerated. I intend to make sure you have that here, no matter how long it takes for the rest of this court to catch up." Lyra studied his profile in the fading light. The sharp lines of his face softened slightly by the warm glow of sunset, and felt something shift within her chest, a small crack forming in the wall she had built around her heart after years of disappointment. She did not know yet if she could fully trust this new life, this sudden queenship thrust upon her, this bond that had upended everything she thought she knew about her place in the world. But for the first time in a very long time, she found herself wanting to try. 3 weeks passed, and Lyra slowly began to learn the rhythms of life within Blackridge Castle. Each morning Nora helped her dress and prepare for the day, sharing small pieces of court gossip that helped Lyra understand the web of alliances and rivalries surrounding the king. Each afternoon, Cale made time to walk with her through the castle grounds, teaching her about the history of his kingdom, the responsibilities of a queen, and the delicate balance required to keep peace among the various packs under his rule. Yet despite the growing comfort between them, Lyra remained acutely aware that not everyone within the castle walls welcomed her presence. She noticed it in the subtle ways nobles avoided eye contact during formal gatherings, the way conversations sometimes stopped abruptly when she entered a room, the polite but hollow smiles offered by court members who clearly resented her sudden rise in status. Celine in particular seemed to appear at every important event, always polished, always watching Lyra with sharp, calculating eyes hidden behind a mask of courtesy. "You handled the council meeting well today," Cale said one afternoon as they walked together through the castle's private garden, a space filled with fragrant flowers and quiet fountains that Lyra had quickly come to love. "I nearly said the wrong thing twice," Lyra admitted, recalling the tense discussion about trade agreements between neighboring territories. "I still don't fully understand half the political customs your court expects me to know." "You are learning faster than most would in your position," Cale said. "Give yourself credit for that." They settled onto a stone bench near one of the fountains, the sound of trickling water offering a peaceful backdrop to their conversation. Lyra had grown to treasure these quiet moments with Cale, the rare times when the weight of his crown seemed to lift slightly, revealing the man beneath the title. "Can I ask you something personal?" Lyra said after a comfortable silence. "Of course." "Nora mentioned that you seemed lonely, even before I arrived. Is that true?" Cale was quiet for a moment, his gaze fixed on the fountain's gentle movement. Ruling a kingdom this large means constant vigilance. Every relationship within these walls carries political weight. Every friendship is scrutinized for hidden motives. It becomes difficult to know who genuinely cares for you, and who simply wants access to your power. He paused. "I stopped expecting genuine connection a long time ago. I focused entirely on duty instead." "That sounds exhausting," Lyra said softly. "It was," Cale admitted, "until 3 weeks ago, when I felt a pull unlike anything I had experienced before, and found myself standing in a hall watching a woman endure public humiliation, with more strength and dignity than most warriors I have trained beside." He turned to look at her, his gray eyes steady and warm. "You reminded me what it felt like to want something for myself, rather than simply for the sake of my kingdom." Lyra's chest tightened with an emotion she struggled to name, something between gratitude and disbelief that a man so powerful could speak so openly about vulnerability. "I am not used to being wanted," she admitted quietly. "For most of my life, people tolerated me at best." "Their loss," Cale said simply, "and my great fortune." A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the sound of the fountain and distant birdsong drifting through the garden. Lyra found herself studying Cale's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the quiet intensity that softened whenever his attention turned toward her, and felt the last remnants of her earlier doubt begin to fade. Their peaceful moment was interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. Celine appeared at the garden entrance, her expression carefully neutral, though her eyes flickered briefly with irritation at finding them together. "Forgive the interruption, Your Majesty," she said smoothly. "Your council requests your presence regarding the border dispute with Ravenswood territory. They say it cannot wait." Cale sighed quietly, rising from the bench. "Duty calls, it seems." He turned to Lyra. "I will find you later this evening." Lyra nodded, watching him disappear through the garden entrance alongside Celine, who cast one final glance over her shoulder. her expression unreadable in the fading afternoon light. Left alone, Lyra remained on the bench, enjoying the quiet solitude of the garden a while longer, before deciding to explore the castle grounds she had not yet visited. She wandered through winding stone paths, eventually finding herself near the castle's eastern wing, an older section of the fortress that appeared less frequently used than the rest. As she walked deeper into the quiet corridor, she overheard voices drifting from a partially open door ahead, low and urgent, clearly meant to remain private. "Cannot allow this bond to stand," a man's voice said, tight with anger. "If she becomes queen, everything we have worked toward for years will be finished." "Patience," Celine's voice replied smoothly. "The king's mate bond may be strong, but bonds can be tested, weakened, even broken under the right circumstances. We simply need the right opportunity." Lyra froze in the corridor, her heart pounding as she listened, careful to keep her breathing quiet. "And if opportunity does not present itself?" the man asked. "Then we create one," Celine said, her voice cold and calculated. "Every person has a weakness. Even the king's precious mate. We simply need to find hers, and use it before she becomes too secure in her position." Lyra's blood ran cold. She backed away slowly from the door, careful not to make a sound, her mind racing with the implications of what she had just overheard. Celine was not simply resentful of her presence. She was actively plotting against her, alongside at least one unknown ally within the castle. She hurried back through the winding corridors, her thoughts spinning with fear and uncertainty. Should she tell Cale immediately? Would he believe her without proof? Or would Celine simply deny everything and frame Lyra as paranoid, insecure in her new position? By the time she reached her own chambers, her hands were trembling slightly. She sat down at the edge of her bed, trying to steady her breathing, replaying the overheard conversation over and over in her mind. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Nora entered, carrying a fresh set of evening clothes, her kind expression immediately shifting to concern at the sight of Lyra's pale face. "My lady, are you well? You look as though you have seen a ghost." Lyra hesitated, unsure how much she should share, even with someone as trustworthy as Nora had proven to be. "I overheard something troubling," she admitted carefully. "A conversation near the eastern wing. Celine was speaking with someone about testing the king's bond, about finding a weakness to exploit." Nora's expression grew serious, all traces of cheerful warmth fading into quiet concern. "You must tell the king immediately," she said firmly. "Celine's ambition has always run deep, but I did not realize she would act against you so directly." "I'm afraid he won't believe me," Lyra admitted. "Or that Celine will simply deny everything and make me look foolish in front of the court." "The king trusts you," Nora said gently, "more than you realize. Whatever fear you carry about not being believed, set it aside. Silence will only give Celine more time to plan." Lyra considered Nora's words carefully, weighing the risk of speaking out against the danger of remaining silent. She thought of the golden shimmer that had passed between her hand and Cale's the night they met, the quiet sincerity in his voice each time he spoke of wanting genuine connection rather than political convenience. Perhaps it was time to trust that sincerity fully, rather than allowing old fears of dismissal to keep her silent. She would tell Cale everything, tonight, and face whatever consequences followed with the same strength that had carried her through every humiliation before this one. Cale listened to every word Lyra spoke without interrupting once, his expression growing darker with each detail she recounted from the overheard conversation. They sat together in his private study, a room lined with old books and maps of the surrounding territories, the fireplace crackling softly in the background. Lyra had waited until after dinner to approach him, wanting privacy for a conversation this sensitive, and now, watching the controlled anger building behind his gray eyes, she felt relieved she had chosen to speak up rather than remain silent. "You are certain it was Celine's voice," Cale said finally, his tone measured despite the tension in his shoulders. "I am certain," Lyra confirmed. "I have spent enough time around her these past few weeks to recognize her voice clearly, even through a partially closed door." "And you did not recognize the man she spoke with?" Lyra shook her head. "His voice was unfamiliar to me, deeper than most of the younger council members, but I could not place it among anyone I have met so far." Cale rose from his chair, moving toward the fireplace, his back to her as he processed the information. "This is not the first time Celine's ambitions have caused concern within my court," he said quietly. "Her father has long pushed for a political marriage between us, believing it would secure his family's influence for generations. I have refused those suggestions repeatedly, but I underestimated how far Celine herself might be willing to go to force the outcome she desires." "What will you do?" Lyra asked. Cale turned to face her, his expression hardening with quiet resolve. I will not act rashly without proof, but I will increase security around you immediately. I will also task Elias with discreetly investigating who else within the castle might be working alongside Celine. Whoever this man is, he holds enough influence to be dangerous, and I intend to identify him before he acts. Lyra nodded, grateful for his measured response rather than dismissal or disbelief. Thank you for trusting me, she said quietly. I worried you might think I was simply insecure in my new position, imagining threats that did not exist. Cale crossed the room and knelt slightly in front of where she sat, taking her hands gently in his own. I would never dismiss your instincts, Lyra. You have survived cruelty most people in this castle could never imagine enduring. If your instincts tell you danger is near, I will listen every single time. The sincerity in his voice eased some of the tension coiled tightly in her chest since overhearing the conversation earlier that day. She studied his face in the firelight, the strong lines softened by genuine concern, and felt the invisible thread of their bond pull warmly between them. There is something else, Cale said after a moment, his tone shifting slightly. I have been meaning to discuss this with you, though perhaps now is not the ideal time given everything else. What is it? The formal announcement of our engagement, he said. Traditionally, a king's mate bond is celebrated publicly within a month of its discovery, followed by a coronation ceremony, once the bond has been properly recognized by the full council. Given what you have just told me, I want to move that timeline forward rather than delay it. Lyra's stomach twisted with nerves. You think announcing our engagement sooner will discourage Celine's plans? I think the sooner the entire kingdom recognizes you as my rightful queen, protected fully under royal law, the harder it becomes for anyone to challenge your position without facing severe consequences. Cale studied her carefully. But I will not force this timeline upon you if you are not ready. This decision belongs to both of us. Lyra considered his words carefully, weighing her lingering uncertainty against the practical wisdom of solidifying her position before Celine's scheme could fully develop. She thought of the golden shimmer between their hands, the growing warmth she felt whenever Cale's attention turned toward her, the quiet strength she had discovered within herself since arriving at Blackridge. I am ready, she said finally, surprising herself with the certainty in her own voice. Move the timeline forward. Let the entire kingdom know exactly where I stand. Something like pride flickered across Cale's expression. Then I will speak with the council first thing tomorrow morning. Over the following days, the castle buzzed with preparations for the upcoming announcement. Nora helped Lyra select formal attire befitting a future queen, while Elias quietly expanded security measures throughout the castle grounds, always careful to avoid drawing unwanted attention to his investigation. Cale remained by Lyra's side more frequently than before, teaching her additional customs and history she would need to understand as queen, while subtly ensuring she was never left alone in less secure areas of the castle. Celine, for her part, appeared entirely unaware that her private conversation had been overheard. She continued attending court functions with the same polished smile, offering polite congratulations regarding the upcoming announcement that did not quite reach her eyes. You seem tense, Nora observed one evening as she helped Lyra prepare for bed. Is it the upcoming announcement, or something else weighing on your mind? Both, Lyra admitted. I keep waiting for Celine to make her next move, but she has been nothing but polite since I told Cale what I overheard. Perhaps she suspects you know something, Nora suggested, or perhaps she is simply biding her time, waiting for a better opportunity. The thought unsettled Lyra deeply. She had hoped that alerting Cale to the danger might discourage Celine entirely, but the calculated patience in Celine's voice during that overheard conversation suggested a woman unwilling to abandon her plans easily. A few nights later, as the castle prepared for the formal engagement announcement scheduled for the following evening, Lyra found herself unable to sleep, her mind restless with anticipation and lingering worry. She rose quietly, wrapping a robe around herself, and made her way toward the castle's private garden, hoping the quiet night air might ease her racing thoughts. The garden was empty and peaceful under the moonlight, the fountain's gentle trickle the only sound breaking the stillness. Lyra settled onto the familiar stone bench, breathing deeply, allowing herself a rare moment of solitude before tomorrow's formal ceremony would place her firmly in the public eye once again. She did not notice the shadow moving quietly along the garden's edge until it was nearly upon her. Enjoying the night air, a woman's voice asked coolly. Lyra turned sharply, her heart lurching as she recognized Celine standing just a few steps away, her expression calm, despite the late hour, moonlight casting sharp shadows across her sharp features. Celine, Lyra said carefully, rising slowly from the bench, every instinct urging caution. I did not expect anyone else to be awake. Neither did I, Celine said, taking a slow step closer. But I find myself unable to sleep, thinking about tomorrow's announcement, about everything that will change once the entire kingdom recognizes you as queen. Her smile remained fixed, cold and calculating. I simply wanted a private moment to offer my congratulations, before the formal celebration makes such honesty impossible. Lyra's pulse quickened, memories of the overheard conversation flooding back sharply. "Thank you," she said carefully, keeping her voice steady despite the tension coiling tightly in her chest. Celine studied her for a long moment, something calculating flickering behind her dark eyes. "You should be careful, Lyra," she said softly, almost gently, though the underlying threat remained unmistakable. "Sudden rises to power often come with unexpected falls. I would hate to see something happen to you, right when everything seems to be falling perfectly into place." Before Lyra could respond, Celine turned and walked away, disappearing back into the shadows of the castle without another word, leaving Lyra standing alone in the moonlit garden, her heart pounding fiercely against her ribs. Tomorrow's announcement suddenly felt less like a celebration, and more like the opening move in a dangerous game she had not yet fully learned how to play. Lyra told Cale about the encounter in the garden the very next morning, watching his expression darken with quiet fury, as she repeated Celine's veiled threat word for word. "She grows bolder," Cale said, pacing slowly across his study, his jaw tight with restrained anger. "Threatening you directly, even wrapped in false pleasantries, tells me she feels confident enough in her position to risk exposure. Or desperate enough," Lyra offered. "Perhaps she knows time is running out before tonight's announcement makes any scheme against me far more difficult to execute." Cale paused, considering her words carefully. "That is possible. Either way, I will not allow her threats to delay tonight's ceremony. If anything, this confirms we are moving in the right direction." Elias arrived shortly after, his expression grim as he reported the results of his quiet investigation over the past several days. "I have identified 2 council members who have met privately with Celine on multiple occasions this past month," he said. "Lord Cassius Bram and his younger cousin, a merchant named Garrick Wells. Both have significant financial ties to trade agreements that would benefit greatly from a marriage alliance between Celine's family and the crown." "Cassius," Cale repeated, frowning. "He has always been ambitious, but I did not think him foolish enough to conspire against a royal mate bond." "Ambition often clouds judgment," Elias said, "especially when significant wealth and influence hang in the balance." Cale's expression hardened further. "Keep watching them both, but do not confront them directly. I want proof solid enough that no one can dismiss it as court gossip or personal rivalry." Elias nodded and departed, leaving Cale and Lyra alone once again in the quiet study. Cale turned to her, his expression softening slightly despite the tension of the morning's revelations. "Tonight's announcement will proceed as planned," he said firmly, "but I want you to remain close to either myself or Elias throughout the entire ceremony. I will not risk Celine or her allies attempting anything while so many witnesses are present." Lyra nodded, though a knot of anxiety remained lodged firmly in her chest. "I trust you," she said quietly. "I only hope tonight goes smoothly, for both our sakes." By evening, the great hall of Blackridge Castle had transformed into a scene of grand celebration, its high stone walls draped with rich banners bearing the royal crest, hundreds of candles casting warm golden light across gathered nobles, warriors, and dignitaries from surrounding territories. Word of the king's mate bond had spread quickly throughout the region, drawing curious guests eager to witness the historic announcement firsthand. Lyra stood beside Cale at the front of the hall, dressed in a deep blue gown that Nora had helped select earlier that day, her nerves steadied slightly by the warm presence of Cale's hand resting gently against the small of her back. She scanned the crowd carefully, searching for any sign of Celine or the men Elias had identified as her allies, though the sheer size of the gathering made it difficult to track every face. Cale stepped forward as the hall quieted, his voice carrying easily across the crowded space. 3 weeks ago, I discovered my fated mate within the halls of Alderpack, a woman whose strength and dignity I have come to admire more deeply with each passing day. His gaze shifted to Lyra, warm and unwavering. Tonight, I formally announce our engagement before this court, and before every territory represented within these walls. A wave of applause rose through the hall, mixed with genuine excitement from many gathered guests who had grown curious about the mysterious woman who had captured their king's attention so suddenly. Lyra felt a small measure of relief at the warmth in the crowd's reaction, though she remained alert, watching carefully for any hint of danger among the celebrating guests. As the formal announcement concluded and the celebration shifted into a more relaxed gathering, with music beginning to play and guests mingling throughout the hall, Lyra found herself briefly separated from Cale as various nobles approached him with congratulations and diplomatic matters requiring his attention. She moved carefully through the crowd, searching for Nora or Elias among the gathered guests, when a firm hand suddenly grasped her arm from behind, pulling her gently but insistently toward a quieter corner of the hall. She turned sharply, her heart lurching with alarm, only to find herself face to face with a man she did not recognize, his expression tense and urgent. "Forgive the intrusion," he said quickly, his voice low. "My name is Garrick Wells. I need to speak with you privately, away from prying ears. It concerns your safety." Lyra's pulse quickened, recognizing the name Elias had mentioned earlier that day. "You are one of Celine's allies," she said carefully, refusing to let her fear show. Garrick's expression shifted, something like shame flickering across his features. "I was," he admitted. "But I no longer wish to be part of what she is planning. I came here tonight to warn you, not to harm you." Lyra studied him carefully, torn between suspicion and the desperate hope that his warning might be genuine. "Warn me of what?" "Celine does not intend to wait patiently for opportunity any longer," Garrick said urgently, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "She has arranged for something to happen tonight, during the celebration, something meant to discredit you publicly, and force the king to reconsider the bond." "What has she arranged?" Lyra demanded, her heart pounding fiercely. Before Garrick could answer, a commotion erupted near the hall's grand entrance, gasps and startled cries rising suddenly above the music and celebratory chatter. Lyra turned sharply, her stomach dropping as she saw smoke beginning to curl from beneath one of the massive tapestries lining the hall's stone walls, flames quickly catching along the fabric's edge. Panic rippled through the crowd as guests began pushing toward the exits, the celebratory mood shattering instantly into chaos and fear. Lyra searched desperately through the panicking crowd for any sign of Cale, her mind racing with the sudden realization that Celine's scheme had finally been set into motion. "This is not an accident," Garrick said grimly beside her, his earlier nervousness replaced by grim resolve. "Celine arranged this distraction deliberately. She intends to use the chaos to make her move against you directly." Lyra's blood ran cold. "Where is she?" Garrick scanned the panicking crowd quickly, before pointing toward a side corridor partially hidden behind one of the hall's grand pillars. "There, I saw her slip away just as the smoke began." Without hesitation, Lyra pushed through the chaotic crowd, ignoring Garrick's urgent warning to wait for the king's guards, driven by a fierce determination she had not fully recognized within herself until this very moment. She had spent years being humiliated, dismissed, and underestimated by people who believed her weak and powerless. Tonight, she refused to remain a passive victim any longer. The corridor beyond the side pillar grew quiet almost instantly, the chaos of the burning tapestry and panicking guests fading behind Lyra as she moved deeper into the narrow stone passage. Her heart pounded fiercely, every instinct screaming at her to turn back, to find Cale or Elias rather than confront whatever waited ahead alone. Yet something fierce and unfamiliar had ignited within her chest since Garrick's warning, a refusal to remain passive while someone else attempted to destroy the life she had only just begun building for herself. She rounded a corner and found Celine standing near a small side door leading toward the castle's outer walls, a satchel slung over one shoulder, her expression sharp with irritation at being discovered. "You should have stayed with the panicking crowd," Celine said coolly, though a flicker of surprise crossed her features at finding Lyra had tracked her so quickly. "It would have been easier for everyone." "Easier for you, perhaps," Lyra said, forcing steadiness into her voice despite her racing heart. "You set the fire deliberately. You wanted chaos so you could slip away and blame me for whatever comes next." Celine's expression shifted into something colder, all pretense of politeness finally abandoned. "You have no idea what you have taken from me," she said, her voice low and bitter. "Years of careful planning, years of positioning my family for influence within this court, all destroyed the moment the king's wolf decided to recognize some weak stranger from a minor pack. I did not ask for this bond," Lyra said firmly. "Neither did Cale. It simply happened, the way bonds are meant to happen. You cannot force something like that to exist, just because it would benefit your family's ambitions." "Ambition is the only thing that has ever protected me in this court," Celine snapped. "Do you think power simply falls into anyone's lap the way it fell into yours? I have spent my entire life earning my place here, cultivating alliances, learning every political game required to survive among nobles who would happily destroy anyone showing weakness. And now you are willing to burn down this hall to protect that ambition," Lyra said quietly. "Willing to hurt innocent guests, simply because your plans did not unfold the way you wanted." Something flickered uncertainly across Celine's expression for a brief moment, quickly buried beneath renewed determination. "The fire is small, contained deliberately. No one will be seriously harmed." I only needed enough chaos to create an opportunity. An opportunity for what exactly? Lyra demanded. Celine reached into the satchel slung over her shoulder, withdrawing a small vial filled with dark liquid. A tonic, capable of temporarily suppressing a wolf's shift entirely, she said. If administered to you tonight, in the chaos following the fire, you would be unable to defend yourself using any wolf abilities whatsoever. A tragic accident could easily follow, one that would leave the king devastated, but ultimately free to consider a more suitable match once sufficient time had passed. Lyra's blood ran cold at the calculated cruelty behind Celine's plan. You intended to hurt me tonight, perhaps kill me, disguised as an accident. I intended to remove an obstacle, Celine said coldly. Nothing more, nothing less. Before Lyra could respond, Celine lunged forward suddenly, attempting to force the vial's contents toward her. Lyra reacted instinctively, years of enduring physical and emotional hardship within Alderpack surfacing in a burst of surprising strength as she grabbed Celine's wrist, twisting it sharply enough to force the vial from her grip. The vial shattered against the stone floor, its dark liquid spilling harmlessly across the corridor. Celine's eyes widened with fury and disbelief. You cannot possibly defeat me, she snarled, lunging again, this time aiming a sharp strike toward Lyra's face. Lyra ducked instinctively, years of quiet observation within Alderpack's training yards, watching warriors practice combat she had never been permitted to join, suddenly proving useful in ways she never expected. She countered Celine's strike, pushing back firmly enough to send her stumbling against the stone wall. I may not have your training, Lyra said fiercely, but I have survived far worse than you could ever imagine throwing at me. Celine recovered quickly, her expression twisting with rage as she prepared to lunge again. Before she could move, heavy footsteps echoed rapidly down the corridor, and Elias appeared, flanked by several guards, his expression grim with barely contained fury. Celine Vale, he said sharply, his voice carrying easily through the narrow stone passage. You are under arrest for conspiracy against the crown and attempted harm against the king's chosen mate. Celine's expression crumbled from fury into desperate panic as the guards moved swiftly to restrain her. This is a mistake, she cried out. I have done nothing except protect the true interests of this kingdom. Save your excuses for the king's formal inquiry, Elias said coldly, nodding for the guards to escort her away. As Celine was led forcibly down the corridor, still protesting loudly, Cale appeared at the opposite end of the passage, his expression shifting rapidly from fierce concern to visible relief the moment he spotted Lyra standing safely, though slightly breathless from the confrontation. Lyra, he said urgently, closing the distance between them quickly, his hands settling gently on her shoulders as he studied her carefully for any sign of injury. Are you hurt? I'm fine, she assured him, though her voice trembled slightly from the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. Celine tried to use me to fake an accident, but I managed to stop her before she could. Cale's jaw tightened with barely restrained anger, as Elias quickly explained the details of Celine's plan, including the tonic intended to suppress Lyra's shift, and the deliberately set fire meant to create chaos within the hall. She could have killed you, Cale said quietly, his voice tight with barely contained emotion as the full weight of the danger settled over him. But she didn't, Lyra said firmly, meeting his eyes steadily. I refused to let her. Cale studied her for a long moment, something fierce and proud flickering behind his gray eyes despite the lingering fear from nearly losing her. You fought her yourself, he said, almost in disbelief, without waiting for rescue. I have spent my entire life being told I was too weak to defend myself, Lyra said quietly. Tonight, I finally proved that wrong, both to Celine and to myself. Cale's expression softened into something deeply tender, pride and relief mingling openly across his features. You never needed anyone's permission to be strong, Lyra. You simply needed the opportunity to prove it, even to yourself. As guards worked to extinguish the last remnants of the fire within the Great Hall, and Celine was led away to face formal judgment before the full council, Lyra realized that tonight marked a turning point far greater than simply surviving another attempt against her life. Tonight, she had discovered a strength within herself that no amount of past humiliation could ever fully erase again. The formal council inquiry into Celine's actions began 3 days later, held within a private chamber adjoining the castle's main hall, attended only by Cale, his senior advisors, and select witnesses whose testimony could shed further light on the conspiracy. Lyra sat quietly beside Cale throughout the proceedings, watching as Celine, stripped of her earlier composure, sat before the council with her hands bound, her expression a mixture of defiance and quiet desperation. Lord Cassius Bram, identified earlier by Elias as one of Celine's primary allies, stood nearby under guard, his face pale with the realization that his involvement could no longer remain hidden. "You will answer honestly," Cale said, his voice carrying the full weight of royal authority, "or face judgment far harsher than what you might otherwise receive." Celine's jaw tightened, though after a long moment of tense silence, she finally spoke. "I acted alone in setting the fire and preparing the tonic," she admitted bitterly, "but the plan itself originated from someone with far greater ambitions than my own." The council chamber fell into tense silence. Cale's gaze sharpened immediately. "Explain." "Cassius approached me nearly 2 months ago," Celine continued, her voice growing steadier, as she seemingly decided that honesty now offered her best chance at leniency. "He convinced me that removing your mate would not simply secure my family's political standing, but would also destabilize your authority enough to weaken your hold over the northern territories he has long sought to bring under his own influence." All eyes turned toward Cassius, whose pale face had grown even paler at Celine's accusation. "Lies," he said quickly, though his voice lacked conviction. "She fabricates accusations to lessen her own punishment. Search his private chambers," Cale commanded one of the guards. "If there is any truth to this accusation, we will find evidence." As guards departed to carry out the search, a commotion arose near the chamber's entrance, drawing everyone's attention. A guard entered hurriedly, announcing an unexpected visitor requesting urgent audience with the king. Lyra's breath caught sharply as Damon Blake stepped into the chamber, looking noticeably thinner and more subdued than the arrogant young man who had humiliated her weeks earlier. His eyes found hers briefly, filled with an emotion she struggled to identify, shame perhaps, or quiet desperation. "Your Majesty," Damon said, bowing low before Cale. "I apologize for arriving unannounced, but I have information regarding Lord Cassius that I believe is critical to this inquiry." Cale studied him carefully, suspicion evident in his gaze. "Speak." Damon straightened, glancing briefly toward Lyra before continuing. "After my father's public shame over rejecting Lyra, our family fell into significant financial difficulty. Several of our creditors quietly withdrew support, no longer willing to associate with a family that had insulted the crown's chosen mate so publicly." He paused. 2 weeks ago, Cassius approached my father directly, offering financial support in exchange for information regarding troop movements within Alder territory. Information he claimed was necessary for expanding trade routes. "And you believe this request was connected to something larger?" Cale said, his tone sharp with growing understanding. "I do," Damon confirmed. "The information Cassius requested had nothing to do with trade. It concerned defensive positions along Alder's northern border, precisely the territory he has long sought to claim for himself. I believe he intended to use the chaos surrounding Celine's plan against Lyra as cover for a broader move against your authority, weakening the northern defenses while the court remained distracted by scandal." The chamber erupted into hushed, urgent whispers among the gathered council members. Cale's expression darkened considerably as the full scope of Cassius's ambitions became clear. "You risk much by coming forward with this information," Cale said carefully, studying Damon with narrowed eyes. "Why reveal this now?" Damon's gaze shifted toward Lyra once more, genuine regret finally surfacing in his expression. "Because I have spent weeks reflecting on my own cruelty toward Lyra, cruelty that nearly cost my family everything, and very nearly allowed a far greater betrayal against this entire kingdom to unfold unnoticed. I cannot undo the humiliation I caused her, but I can at least ensure Cassius's true intentions do not succeed." Lyra studied Damon carefully, surprised by the sincerity behind his admission. She did not fully forgive him, the memory of that humiliating night still fresh and painful, but she recognized the courage required to stand before the king and admit fault so openly. The guards returned shortly afterward, carrying documents discovered within Cassius's private chambers, detailed maps of Alder's northern defenses alongside correspondence outlining plans to gradually expand his influence into the region under the guise of legitimate trade negotiations. Faced with undeniable evidence, Cassius's composure finally shattered entirely. "I only sought what was rightfully owed to my family after generations of loyal service," he said bitterly. "The northern territories should have been granted to my bloodline decades ago." "Ambition does not grant entitlement," Cale said coldly, "nor does it excuse conspiracy and attempted harm against my chosen mate." The council quickly reached its verdict. Cassius and Celine were both stripped of their titles and sentenced to permanent exile from Blackridge territory, their families' assets seized to compensate for the damages caused by their scheming. Celine's earlier defiance crumbled entirely as guards led her away, her ambitions finally and completely extinguished. As the chamber slowly emptied following the council's decision, Damon lingered near the entrance, hesitant to leave without addressing Lyra directly. "I know an apology cannot undo what I did to you," he said quietly, approaching her carefully. "But I am sincerely sorry, Lyra. You deserved far better than the cruelty I showed you that night." Lyra studied him for a long moment, weighing years of hurt against the genuine remorse now evident in his expression. "Thank you for coming forward today," she said finally. "It took courage, especially given everything you risked by doing so." "It was the least I could do," Damon said quietly, before bowing respectfully and departing the chamber. Once he had gone, Cale turned to Lyra, his expression thoughtful. "That took considerable grace on your part," he said softly. "Forgiveness is not easily given after the humiliation you endured." "I have not fully forgiven him," Lyra admitted honestly. "But holding on to anger indefinitely would only weigh me down further. I would rather focus on building the life I have found here, rather than dwelling on the pain of what came before." Cale's expression softened with quiet admiration. "You continue to surprise me, Lyra Hart. Every day, I discover another reason why my wolf recognized you as the one meant to stand beside me." As the threat of Selene and Cassius's conspiracy finally came to an end, Lyra felt a profound sense of relief settle over her, mixed with quiet anticipation for whatever challenges still lay ahead. The northern territories remained secure, the immediate danger neutralized, yet she understood that ruling alongside Cale would likely bring further tests of strength and resilience in the days to come. She found herself ready to face them, whatever they might be. In the weeks following Cassius and Selene's exile, Blackridge Castle settled into a quieter rhythm, though Lyra could sense the lingering unease among certain court members who had once aligned themselves with the disgraced nobles. "There will always be those who quietly resent change," Cale explained one afternoon as they walked together through the training yards, watching warriors practice beneath the midday sun. "Cassius and Selene may be gone, but some of their former allies remain within the castle, watching carefully to see how you handle your new position." "Then I should learn to defend myself properly," Lyra said firmly, watching the warriors move through their combat drills with practiced precision. "I refuse to rely solely on luck the next time danger finds me." Cale studied her thoughtfully. "Are you asking me to train you?" "I am asking you to help me become someone capable of protecting not just myself, but eventually this kingdom alongside you," Lyra said. "I have spent my entire life being told my wolf was too weak to matter. I want to prove that wrong, permanently." A slow, proud smile spread across Cale's face. "Then let us begin immediately." Over the following weeks, Lyra dedicated herself entirely to intensive training, working alongside Elias and several trusted warriors within the castle's private training grounds. She learned combat techniques suited to her smaller frame, discovering that speed and precision could often outmatch raw strength when applied correctly. She practiced shifting exercises meant to help her better control her wolf, guided patiently by an elderly healer named Freya, who specialized in helping wolves with unconventional shifting patterns. "Your wolf is not weak," Freya told her one afternoon, observing closely as Lyra attempted a controlled partial shift within the healer's private study. "It is simply different, shaped by years of suppression and fear rather than confidence and support. Given proper guidance, your wolf holds more potential than most people within this castle realize." Lyra focused intently, drawing on months of patient encouragement from Cale, Elias, and Freya, pushing past the mental barriers built through years of humiliation within Alderpack. Slowly, she felt her wolf respond differently than ever before, a warmth spreading through her limbs as her shift began to take a fuller, more complete form than she had ever managed previously. Freya's eyes widened with quiet astonishment as Lyra's shift completed fully for the first time in her life, her wolf emerging strong and healthy, free from the fractured incompleteness that had plagued her since childhood. "Remarkable," Freya whispered. "Your bond with the king has done more than simply connect your hearts. It has strengthened your very wolf, allowing it to heal from wounds carried since birth." Lyra shifted back slowly, tears of disbelief and joy streaming down her face, as she absorbed the significance of what had just happened. For years she had been told her wolf would never fully develop, that she would remain weaker than her peers indefinitely. Now, standing within Freya's private study, she had proven that belief entirely false. When she shared the news with Cale later that evening, his reaction mirrored her own overwhelming emotion, pride and joy mixing openly across his features as he pulled her into a warm, steady embrace. "I always believed your wolf held more strength than anyone gave it credit for," he said quietly against her hair. "I am simply grateful to witness you finally proving it, both to this court and to yourself. News of Lyra's completed shift spread quickly throughout the castle, shifting the attitudes of many remaining skeptics who had quietly doubted her worthiness as future queen. Warriors who had once watched her training sessions with polite indifference began offering genuine encouragement, while nobles who had previously kept their distance grew noticeably warmer in their interactions. Yet not everyone within the castle celebrated her growing strength. Word eventually reached Elias of a small faction among the castle guards, former loyalists to Cassius who had quietly maintained contact with him even after his exile. Resentful of his fall from power and eager to see his influence restored, Elias reported the concerning development to Cale and Lyra during a private meeting within the king's study. They call themselves the Northern Loyalists, Elias explained grimly, a small but dangerous group who believe Cassius's exile was unjust and who quietly plan some form of retaliation against the crown. How dangerous are we speaking of? Cale asked, his expression hardening. Dangerous enough to warrant serious concern, Elias said. I have identified at least a dozen guards and 2 minor nobles involved so far, though I suspect the group's true numbers may be larger. Lyra felt a familiar surge of determination rise within her chest, the same fierce resolve that had carried her through Celine's earlier attack. What is their plan? Based on intercepted communications, they intend to strike during the upcoming autumn festival, Elias explained. A large public gathering where security typically relaxes slightly to accommodate visiting dignitaries and common folk celebrating together. They likely hope to use the chaos of such a large crowd to attempt something against either the king or yourself. Cale's jaw tightened with barely restrained anger. We will increase security discreetly, without alarming the general public or alerting the Northern Loyalists that we are aware of their plans. I want to help prepare for this, Lyra said firmly. Not simply hide behind additional guards, but actively contribute to keeping this kingdom safe. Cale studied her carefully, clearly weighing the risks of allowing her direct involvement against her evident capability and determination. You have grown remarkably strong these past months, he acknowledged. But the Northern Loyalists are dangerous, and I will not risk your safety carelessly. I am not asking you to risk me carelessly, Lyra said. I am asking you to trust the strength I have worked so hard to build, the same way you trusted my instincts regarding Celine's earlier conspiracy. After a long moment of consideration, Cale nodded slowly. Very well. You will train specifically for this threat, alongside Elias and our most trusted warriors. But you will not act alone, no matter how confident you become in your abilities. Lyra agreed readily, grateful for his trust, despite his lingering protective instincts. Over the following weeks, she trained intensively alongside Elias and a small group of trusted warriors, preparing specifically for the possibility of confrontation during the upcoming festival. As the day of the autumn festival finally arrived, Blackridge Castle buzzed with excitement, common folk and dignitaries from surrounding territories gathering within the castle's outer courtyards for a day of celebration, music and feasting. Beneath the festive atmosphere, however, Lyra remained alert, watching carefully for any sign of the Northern Loyalists' planned attack, trusting the months of intensive preparation that had transformed her from a humiliated outcast into a capable protector of the kingdom she now called home. Whatever challenge awaited her today, she felt ready to face it, not as a victim requiring rescue, but as a queen prepared to defend her people alongside the king she had grown to love. The autumn festival unfolded beautifully throughout the early afternoon, music drifting across the castle courtyards as common folk and visiting dignitaries mingled freely, enjoying food, dancing, and friendly games organized for the celebration. Lyra walked alongside Cale through the crowded courtyard, greeting guests warmly while remaining discreetly alert, her earlier months of training keeping her senses sharp despite the festive distractions surrounding them. Elias moved quietly through the crowd nearby, along with several trusted warriors positioned strategically throughout the gathering, all watching carefully for any sign of the Northern Loyalists' anticipated move. As the sun began to lower in the sky, casting long golden shadows across the courtyard, Lyra noticed a small group of guards gathering unusually close to the castle's eastern gate, their movements slightly too deliberate for the relaxed atmosphere of the celebration. She caught Elias's attention with a subtle glance, and he nodded almost imperceptibly, having noticed the same suspicious gathering. It's beginning, Lyra murmured quietly to Cale. Cale's expression sharpened instantly, though he maintained a calm, composed demeanor for the sake of the surrounding guests, unaware of the danger quietly building near the eastern gate. Stay close, he said softly, but trust your training if circumstances require you to act. Moments later, a sudden commotion arose near the eastern gate, guards shouting urgently as several figures dressed in castle uniforms turned against their fellow warriors, weapons drawn with clear intent to cause harm. Panic rippled through the nearby crowd as guests scattered, screaming in confusion and fear. Northern Loyalists, Elias called out sharply, rushing toward the chaos alongside several trusted warriors. Kale moved instinctively to shield Lyra, though she quickly stepped forward instead, her wolf senses sharpening as adrenaline surged through her veins. "I can help," she said firmly. "Let me fight alongside you, not behind you." Kale hesitated only a moment before nodding, trusting the strength she had worked so hard to develop. Together, they moved swiftly toward the eastern gate, where a fierce confrontation had already begun between loyal castle guards and the small but determined group of rebels seeking to avenge Cassius's exile. Lyra spotted the apparent leader of the Northern Loyalists, a broad-shouldered guard named Rowan, directing his companions with sharp, urgent commands as they attempted to push through toward the castle's inner courtyard, clearly intent on reaching either Kale or Lyra directly amid the chaos. "Stand down," Kale commanded loudly, his voice carrying easily above the commotion. "Surrender now, and your punishment will be far less severe than continued resistance." Rowan sneered, clearly unwilling to back down easily. "Cassius deserved better than exile," he shouted back. "We will not stand by while outsiders claim what rightfully belonged to loyal families of this kingdom." He lunged suddenly toward Kale, weapon raised, but Lyra moved quickly, intercepting his attack with a precise, practiced counter that sent his weapon clattering harmlessly across the stone courtyard. Rowan stumbled backward, clearly startled by the speed and skill of her defense. "You underestimate me," Lyra said fiercely, echoing words she had once believed impossible to say about herself with any real confidence, just as Celine once did. Rowan recovered quickly, attempting another strike, but Lyra's months of intensive training paid off completely as she countered his every move with practiced precision, eventually disarming him fully and forcing him to the ground beneath a firm, controlled hold. Around her, Kale and the castle's loyal guards quickly subdued the remaining rebels, the brief but intense confrontation ending far more swiftly than the Northern Loyalists had likely anticipated, given the extensive preparation Kale and Lyra had quietly arranged in the weeks leading up to the festival. As guards moved to restrain the defeated rebels, Kale turned toward Lyra, his expression a mixture of relief, pride, and deep admiration. "You fought brilliantly," he said softly, reaching out to gently brush a strand of hair from her face, "just as I always believed you could." "We fought together," Lyra corrected gently. "As we should from now on." The surrounding crowd, having witnessed the brief but decisive confrontation, erupted into astonished murmurs, quickly transforming into genuine applause and cheers, as word spread rapidly about Lyra's direct role in defending the kingdom against the Northern Loyalists' attempted uprising. The same court that had once dismissed her as unworthy now looked upon her with newfound respect and admiration. In the days following the festival, the remaining Northern Loyalists were swiftly identified and dealt with according to the king's justice, their brief rebellion thoroughly extinguished. Peace settled comfortably over Blackridge once again, this time without lingering doubt regarding Lyra's strength or her rightful place beside the king. With the immediate threats to their kingdom finally resolved, Kale saw no reason to delay their formal coronation any longer. Preparations began immediately, transforming Blackridge Castle into a scene of grand celebration unlike anything the kingdom had witnessed in generations. On the day of the coronation, Lyra stood within the same great hall where she had first been welcomed as Kale's mate, now dressed in a flowing gown of deep gold, her presence commanding quiet awe from the hundreds of guests gathered to witness the historic ceremony. Representatives from every territory under Kale's rule had traveled to attend, including, unexpectedly, several members of Alderpack, their expressions notably humbled compared to the cruel mockery displayed during Lyra's initial humiliation months earlier. Kale stood before her, his gray eyes filled with unmistakable love and pride, as the kingdom's eldest healer placed a delicate golden crown gently upon Lyra's head, formally recognizing her as queen before the entire assembled court. "Let it be known throughout every territory within this kingdom," Kale declared, his voice carrying easily across the silent hall, "that Lyra Hart, once dismissed and humiliated by those too blind to recognize true strength, now stands rightfully as queen, chosen not simply by fate, but proven worthy through courage, resilience, and unwavering dedication to this kingdom's well-being." The hall erupted into thunderous applause, guests rising to their feet in genuine celebration rather than the forced courtesy Lyra had once feared she would forever face within these walls. She scanned the crowd, catching sight of Nora's beaming smile, Elias's proud nod, and even a brief, humbled acknowledgement from Damon, standing quietly near the back of the hall. As the formal ceremony concluded and the celebration shifted into joyful festivities, Kale took Lyra's hand gently, guiding her toward the same balcony overlooking the courtyard where she had first glimpsed Blackridge Castle months earlier, uncertain and afraid of the unknown life awaiting her. "Do you remember how frightened you were that first night?" Cale asked softly, watching the celebration continue below them. "I remember," Lyra said, smiling warmly as she leaned gently against him. "I never imagined then that I would stand here today, not simply as your mate, but as a queen capable of defending this kingdom alongside you." Cale turned to face her fully, his expression filled with quiet wonder and deep affection. "You have exceeded every expectation I dared to hope for, Lyra, not because I demanded it of you, but because you refused to let anyone, including yourself, underestimate your true strength ever again." Lyra reached up gently, resting her palm against his cheek, feeling the warm, steady pulse of the bond that had transformed her entire life since that humiliating night in Alderpack's Grand Hall. "We built this together," she said softly. "Every challenge, every victory, every moment of doubt overcome." Below them, the courtyard glowed warmly with celebration, music and laughter drifting upward into the evening sky. A kingdom finally at peace, united fully behind a queen who had once been publicly humiliated, now standing proudly beside her king, forever changed from the woman she used to be, into the strong, capable leader she was always destined to become.